So creative, add copy, images, format, layout, background, all of those things as it relates to media buying is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the things that are working today with creative, the things that maybe aren't working as well with creative anymore. We're talking about testing new creative. How do you identify better creative, winning creative for your ads? And of course, I am back with none other than John Mulry, my traffic generation wizard. And so, what's up, John?
What's happening, Todd? Really, really excited about today and talking about creative. I think it's definitely a part of the process that's often not talked about. And I think it's so important, especially today. I'm so really excited.
Yeah, very cool. So it's actually interesting. The reason why I really chose this topic was because I had the opportunity to hang out with my good friend Rich Sheprin, who is, I always say this to me, he's the smartest guy. He's the smartest guy I know. He's the smartest guy in the online marketing world. He's connected to everybody, the blah blah blah. Anyway, well, one of the things that we were talking about was the importance of creative. And so it was really front and center for me after that conversation. And so I said, you know what, I really want to hear how you approach creative, and your kind of process for testing, creative. And in a second, we'll define creative, or kind of just talk about what, when we say creative, where your mind goes and what you're thinking and all that. But the interesting thing for me, really wanting to hear your approach and your methodology, is because, again, like we talked about a couple of calls ago, like, the fact that you've got this unique kind of background, and what separates you from the overwhelming majority of media buyers out there is that you've got this foundation in direct response. So you understand copy, you understand hooks, you understand ideas, you understand the unique mechanism, you understand avoiding, hyperbole, all of that kind of stuff. And you understand the media buying side of things. And so I have to believe that that has impacted your approach and perspective on creative. And so that's what I want to try to draw out of you today. So let's just start with, when I say creative, what does that mean? Like, I guess let's start by defining that. Give me your definition of creative for me and for everybody listening.
My definition of creative would probably fall under that. It's like, well, first and foremost, it's like an extension of your marketing campaign. Like, it's the first part of the marketing campaign that your prospects are going to see. So, like, in terms of the way I look at a creative, I look at it from like a dual point of view. I look at the strategic side of creative, and then like the tactical nuances within that creative, because it's the first thing that people will see. So it has to be strategically aligned with your overall campaign message, your overall campaign offer, the offer type, the type of lead that you're using in your campaign. It all has to be matched up with the creative, because otherwise you might get super high click-through rates and super high engagement on a creative, but then when they get over to the page, whatever type of funnel page you're sending them to, there's a massive, if it's not congruent, it's just gonna, it could just fall flat. So first and foremost, when I think of creative, or when we think of creative for our clients, it's all about matching up the market with a message that resonates with the overall message of the campaign.
Got it. So just to start, right, you use the word congruent. And so I think that, hopefully for everybody, that's, that's common sense, right? That, like, your ad creative has to be congruent with wherever it is that you are sending folks. You don't want to have kind of one hook on it that's being used in your ad creative, and then something wildly different on whatever landing page you're bringing them to. And so,
Yeah,
uh,
so like an example of that would be, and this is actually a mistake we see a lot. Let's say there's a campaign that people are using, and the lead to, let's say they're using the problem solution type lead, and but then their creative is they're using an offer lead. So they're talking about the offer and the creative when they're introducing people to a problem, and their offer is the solution when they get to the long form sales page. That
mm,
doesn't make sense, because they're leading with the offer when they're not leading with the offer on the actual page. So congruency isn't just about like the look of the feel of the creative being congruent with whatever it is you're sending to them. It's also congruent with the like the type of campaign you've put together, your creative needs to be congruent with that. Otherwise, again, you could be, dropping the ball and missing out on results that you could be getting if things were a lot more aligned.
Wow, so good. So when we're talking about congruence in this context, and you really took it up a level, for me, I hadn't even really given much thought to that prior. But so we're not only talking about congruence in the messaging, the hook, the angle, all of that kind of stuff, but you're also talking about congruence with the first and foremost the lead type. So if you're, indirect, direct, matching that up with the ad creative. And so making sure that, let's say, if your lead type is more indirect, is more, let's say, story based, not to use a more direct hook or angle with the ad creative as well. I would think, tell me and correct me if I'm mistaken, but I would think that that also includes kind of the dominant resident emotion, that if, let's say, you are, you are leveraging more of a fear-based approach, that you're going to leverage that not only on the landing page, but you're going to leverage that in the ad creative. You're not going to mix it up. You're not going to have, greed play here and a fear-based on the landing page, or vice versa, or something like that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, we see the creative as an extension of whatever lead type you're using in your campaign. Now, obviously, you can code, like pun intended, get creative with how you're approaching that.
Right.
But like at first and foremost, like it doesn't make any sense to be doing like an offer type creative where you're showing a picture of your product and the price and everything else, and then you're sending people to a long form sales page where the first 1,000 words is like there's no mention of an offer anywhere, and like
Got
it
it.
just people are going to be confused and they're going to bail. They're going to like, I thought if this was like an offer, maybe they didn't like the scroll element. They don't want to be scrolling or whatever the case may be. So you have to take that stuff into consideration. And like oftentimes that like it's like the simple changes like that can have a big impact in your results because like it all comes back to that congruency. When people click, they want to make sure that whatever they're clicking on is related to what you actually send them to on all levels, not just from the copy to hook element, but like from all levels, because the like commitment and consistency and the congruency of that when there's follow through, we just see better results with that. And then it goes back same thing. Then if you are using like let's say you have a low price front end and you're going heavy on the fact that it is a low price front end on the sales page and there's a button above the fold to buy with prices and everything else, then ads that do leverage that type of language and do leverage that type of a creative where you are talking about the offer in the creative, then yeah, for sure, use those things. But if you're not using those things at the initial part of the sales page, do not be using those things in your creatives because it just doesn't make sense and it's not aligned.
Totally. Very, very cool, man. So, the idea of expectation, what is the prospect expecting when they click on the ad and go over to the landing page, not only includes the hook, the angle, right, continuing with the dominant resident emotion, but also the lead type itself, or the if you're being direct, if you're showing the offer, the expectation is that when they hit the landing page, they're not going to be taken into some indirect campaign, story-based campaign. If you're showing the offer, then bring to that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so what else? Very cool, man. And so what else as it relates to creative?
So like there's a couple of nuances between say creative on Facebook and creative on YouTube, and I think I'd like to talk about like our process for testing on both of those because they are different. But first and foremost, for us,
Well, so
we
wait, wait,
see
wait,
things.
hang on. So wait 1 second. So before you get to the testing, because we're definitely going to get there, I definitely want to hear that. But so before we get there, I want to talk a little bit more about creative. Because so last night when Rich and I were chatting, like one of the things that we were talking about as it relates to creative, right? So of course, part of the creative is right. Part of the creative, and I would say that this goes both on the marketing campaign side as well as the media buying side, is certainly the angle, the hook, the idea that you are using. To me, right, this is one of the things that kind of my contribution, my big contribution to the conversation last night was that I really think that even more valuable, much more valuable from my perspective than in the creative than just the formatting, than just the background, than just the model that you're using, whoever is on camera, is right. Are you tapping into an idea that is viewed as unique, fresh, timely, that is different, right? Like, so in other words, a change in the background of a video, while that can certainly produce an incremental increase in response, it won't have the same kind of potential to increase response that a change of idea can have, right? So a change in the idea, change in the hook, a change in the angle, a change in the overall theme, can really make a huge difference. That being said, I want to talk about things like, for a second, do you consider, or how much do you consider, when thinking about creative, things like, who is what's the face that you're using in the ad, or who's the model that you're using in the video? Is it a man? Is it a woman? Does it match the demographic of the audience? And I would ask the same thing as it relates to the kind of the background. There's a big difference between, let's say, having a bookshelf behind you, having nothing behind you, having a bunch of awards behind you, whatever it may be. And so, any insight that you would give with those two things,
Yeah, so
background
I
and
think
model person?
I see those things as the tactical nuances to the creative. I see the strategic side first and foremost as our priority is like what you said. It's the hooks, it's the angles, is what we have new, fresh, different. Is it exciting? Is it, and all those things that we talk about from like a strategic point of thing. Like first and foremost, that's where our minds go, because like that's what's going to make up the bulk of the results. After that, the tactical nuances, like, oh, are we using a background? Are we using a spokesperson? If it's a video, is it the expert on camera? Is it not? Is it text? All that stuff I see as secondary to the strategic side of things first and foremost.
Okay, but still valuable. So I agree with you completely, right? I think that, like, look, it in a lot of ways, John, it reminds me of when I would say, crude saying, but like, putting lipstick on a pig. Like, it's, if you've got a weak idea, a weak, hook, angle, perspective, if it's run of the mill, if it's ordinary, right, then what most marketers and entrepreneurs attempt to do is to make it sound extraordinary with word choice, to spice it up with copy. And I think that a lot of people attempt to do that as well in their media with their creative. They try to do these little tiny tactical things that can play a role, but they do these little tactical things to try to increase response. But yet it's the underlying idea, hook, angle that is really, from my perspective, the big mover. It's not to discount the value of those things like the spokesperson, the background, and all of the other elements of the creative. It's just to say that, right, those things on top of an ordinary hook, angle, idea aren't going to move the needle nearly as much as a great idea. I would even go as far as to say personally that a great idea, even with average creative, is going to do better than an ordinary run-of-the-mill idea with great creative. And so, okay, but so let's shift gears. And so, can you just walk through, maybe high level, how before we get to testing, how you begin to even think about creative? So there's a campaign, and now you want to start to put together the creative for some media buying. What's the process that you go through? What are you thinking about? What are you looking at? What are you analyzing? How are you making decisions about the initial creative that you're going to use?
So the first thing that we normally do is do like when we, let's say when we onboard a client, we do our onboarding call, and like that's normally shifted into three parts. And one of those parts is, well, two of those parts are talking about where we get the bulk of our angles and ideas for creative. First and foremost, we're doing a deep talk and analysis on the market, like the target customer for this offer. And then secondly, we're doing a deep dive into the actual offer in terms of like what are what are the problems or problems that it's solving, all these type of things. And we're doing a deep analysis. And from there, we generally get we can generally get a flood of ideas of potential angles for creatives there. And then once we have those, the next part where we generally look is in terms of, okay, let's look at the actual messaging on the pages where we're going to be sending people, and then can we pull angles from those pages and make them nearly like an extension of the page. So let's say, for example, if there's a particular offer that's talking about, it's the example that you always use, the lush green lawn and everything else. So let's say there's a sales page talking about that desire that someone has to have a lush green lawn, and on the sales copy is talking about all of these different benefits and all of these different things related to a lush green lawn, and then we may pull those and get ideas directly from the sales page or directly from the landing page where we're sending people, because again, that's naturally going to lead to congruency in the actual ads because we're pulling it directly from the page that people are going to. Then after that, like we also want to look at, and this is, I think, something that not a lot of people do, is that we want to make sure that we get to see competitors' creative, because obviously if someone is interested in a certain topic, or they're interested in a certain team, or they're looking to solve a certain problem, they're going to be exposed to more than just our ads or our clients' ads. They're also going to be exposed to other ads from competitors. So we want to make sure that we're looking at the competitors' ads to see what they're doing, not only from the point of view of, okay, like the competitor's been running a certain ad for a certain length of time, so that type of an ad is doing well, but also to have that contrast between our competitors. We call it competitors contrast. So it's basically that we can sometimes leverage elements in our ads that maybe competitors aren't leveraging, that we can, like, to have that tactical advantage or that edge over them. Let's say, for example, if all competitors are leveraging square videos, we may leverage landscape videos just to stand out against the competitors. So it's important to look at the competitor stuff as well, not only to get potential ideas, but also potential ways of standing out against competitors when people are scrolling through the news feed, or if people are watching videos on YouTube or whatever the case may be.
And so, okay, so there are, so when are you using what you see competitors doing that is working for them, and when do you use what you learn about competitors to do the opposite, or to stand out, right? Like, I have to imagine that there's some, in terms of competitive analysis, there's some things that you look at, you see this is working well for them. They're obviously running this ad continually, and have been, in their direct response. So we know that they obviously know the numbers. And so, like, what are some of the things that you're using from competitors to model, and versus the things that you're seeing from competitors that you want to contrast in your approach?
So if it's an offer that's like, if it's a brand new offer and it's like it's never been ran before, we may look at competitors that
You're
have
talking
similar
about
type
the
of
client.
offers.
You're talking about
Yeah.
the client's offer. Okay.
Yeah, so let's say they're launching a newer offer, or a new offer that they haven't run a ton of traffic to already, and we they come on board with us, and this is a new offer that they're promoting, let's say, for example, and there isn't any data in their account that we can look at in terms of past performance and things that could be improved. Then we'll do a lot of competitor analysis that with competitors that have similar offers, because if there's competitors out there running similar offers and they have ads that they've been running for a number of, weeks or months, we can assume that we, with high probability that these ads are ads that are producing good results for them. So we can either model what they're doing from the creative point of view, and then we'll, in our testing process further down the line, then we may start to add in the contrast elements that I talked about. But first and foremost, we would leverage competitors if it's a newer offer. If it's an offer with existing data, we're going to leverage what has already worked first and foremost. So let's say we take on a client and they've been running ads for quite some time for this particular offer, but maybe they just haven't been thrilled with the results that they're getting. So then the first things that we would do is, when we would do a deep dive into their account and deep dive into what's been done already, we may find that there's some, winners in there, some gold in there that we can leverage. And then when we're in our testing process, as part of that testing process, we may introduce some of the contrast elements from competitors like I talked about. And I
Okay,
can talk
got it.
through the testing process in a little bit more detail if that's helpful. I mean, because we have a very particular testing process for Facebook as well as for YouTube as well.
Yeah, so let's segue into that. We'll probably bounce. I'll probably have some questions that'll bounce back and forth a little bit, but let's segue into. So, yeah, so okay, so what is the process for identifying winning creative that you use? Like, how do so what's that process? Start with, you could start with Facebook. You don't have to go back and forth between Facebook and YouTube. Start with Facebook, and then you could explain YouTube. So, what's your process for finding winning creative?
So first and foremost with Facebook, we generally start with image ads because they're the easiest to test and they're the easiest to get live and get going. If the client is they like some clients are super quick with video, so they like if we give them either a outline of videos or we give them scripts, they can record them and have it back to us in a couple of days and we can have them edited or whatever. Some other clients are not so comfortable in video, which is always why we default to image first. So let's say we made the decision that we're going to test out images on Facebook. We use a 3 by 3 by 3 method. So that's where we start with 3 images, 3 headlines, and 3 text variations. And that gives us up to 27 different creatives to test at the beginning. And how we do that is that we have our 3 images, and each of those images would follow a similar theme or hook or angle. So we're not mixing up angles in our images, or we're not mixing up themes in our images, and each of the headlines would all follow that similar angle, hook, or theme, as well as the descriptions, or as well as the primary text parts of that. So basically, every Facebook ad is made up of the big part of it, which is either image or video. We have the headline, and then we have the primary text. There's also a description, but these days we typically don't use the description at all because it kind of truncates the copy when you see the actual ad. So basically, we focus on those 3 elements, and then within the biggest things for us are going to be like what people see initially. It's that thumb stop. They're going to see the image first and foremost, and then after that they either look at the headline or they look at the primary text. So the first thing that we're looking to dial in is the images, and then with the 3 copy variations, the 3 primary text variations, typically we do a longer copy version, a shorter copy version, which maybe just 1 or 2 sentences, and then like kind of like a somewhere in between. And they're, again, like I said, they're all following that one hook, that one theme, or that one angle. And we would test those for a period of time. Typically, like at a minimum, we're looking to get 1,000 impressions on each of those ads. But like longer term, what we're looking to do from our creatives is to spend at least 1 times the allowable CPA that the client is willing to pay for that lead or for that sale, to give the creative enough time to see if it can produce the result. And then with those 27 creatives, normally there's maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 that just really take off, and the others are either in between or really, really poor. And then we go in, and then with like the winners from that, we would add to our main ad sets, and then we would go back to start that testing process all over again. And if we find like that the hook or the angle is producing good results, not just from a click-through rate point of view, but also from the actual result that we want point of view, well, then we may stick with the same angle or hook and just work on different variations of those 3 elements that I talked about. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And so the question that I have is, so you said that there's always, there's 4, there's 5, there's 6, whatever number of ads that take off. How do you quantify take off? Like, I know we talked about in one of the prior calls, we talked about optimizing for the result, not optimizing for steps along the journey. What's the metric? Like, how do you determine from the data what is taking off? Like, what's the number that you're looking at?
So the initial number we're looking at is link click-through rate. So we want to make sure that we're getting our baseline click-through rate. So like our bottom level is usually around that 1% level click-through rate, link click-through rate. So there's 2 click-through rates on Facebook. There's click-through rate, which means they might click on anywhere on the ad. They might click the see more button. They might click like. They might click comment. They might click share. They might click on the image. They might just click anywhere on the actual ad itself. What we're looking at is link click-through rate, and we want that to be a minimum of, say, around 1%. Sometimes we can get away with less, but typically our initial KPI is around 1%, but ideally closer to 1.5. If the ad is getting in and around that level, we're just going to leave it and let the algorithm do its thing. That's the initial metric we look at when we're looking to get the first 1,000 impressions. As we start to approach a level of spend on the ad, that's where we're getting our second, arguably more important metric is that okay, it's coming approach. Let's say the we're doing a lead generation campaign and the client is willing to pay $15 a lead. We're next, and once we have ads that are producing a click-through rate, say of 1% of above, we're going to let them run up to the ideal CPA, which is the $15 a lead. So at the lower level, we're just going to let it spend one-time CPA. If the client is a little bit sheepish on spend, we're just going to let it spend one-time CPA to see if we're getting leads. At the higher end, I much prefer to go say to two-time CPA just to give the algorithm enough chance to actually spend to see if we can get the results. So first and foremost, click-through rate, but the second one is the actual result that we want, which is either a lead or a sale.
Got it. Okay. Wow. You shared a lot there, which I appreciate. That's I got to digest some of that for sure. And so, okay. And so what's the process on YouTube for the initial testing?
So for YouTube, it's a little bit different because the main creative is just it's video. So like the video itself is how we construct that video is where the bulk of the creative testing is done because we see the video as it's like as there's three parts to every video. There's the opening or the hook, there's the body, and then there's the actual style of the video. So like whether it's talking head, whether it's text, or whatever the case may be. So we're testing like the initial parts that we're testing from a YouTube point of view is the hook part because obviously within 5 seconds someone could skip the video if we're using skippable in-stream ads, which is primarily what we would do. So basically, skippable in-stream ads, in case anyone's not familiar, is an ad that's overlaid on top of the video that people wanted to watch when they clicked the ad. So like within the first 5 seconds, like the people have no choice. They must watch the first 5 seconds. After that, they can skip. So it's those within those first 5 seconds where we're really doing the bulk of our testing because like that's going to determine whether people hit skip or whether keep watching. And obviously, we want some people to skip. We want the wrong people to skip, but we want the right people to keep watching. So we do the bulk of our testing initially around the hook or the opening of the video. So generally speaking, the way we construct our video ads on YouTube is that we may have say 5 different hooks that are like approaching the video from 5 different ways. And then we have like the one core body part of it. And then we may in the future start testing different call to actions at the end or introducing call to actions earlier in the video. But first and foremost, we're testing the hook of the video as well as we have with our YouTube ad, we have the main video, like I said, but we also have a headline, we have a description, we have the long description, and we have the thumbnail of the video. They're not as important, but they are important. They're not as important as the hook, but they are equally they're the next most important thing after that. And like these in the past, like this was a change I didn't get to mention last week when we discussed, but in the past, all of that used to have to be done individually. So we'd have like individual ads, individual headlines, individual descriptions. But in the past couple of months, YouTube have actually made it easier to test now. So you can when you go to create a YouTube campaign and you're uploading your creatives, you can upload 5 videos at a time, 5 headlines at a time, 5 descriptions at a time, 5 long descriptions at a time. So you can do the testing a lot quicker now, which is really good for us. But you still have to test the right elements because, like we talk about a lot on our marketing calls, we want to test things that scream, not whisper. And first and foremost, the thing that screams is that opening 5 seconds of the video. It's like what we talked about last week. The opening is to get them to read the next part and to get them to read the next part. And it's much like the video. If the opening doesn't engage them, doesn't draw in the right prospect and repel the wrong one, like the chances are we're going to have people skipping when they shouldn't be skipping and people watching when they shouldn't be watching.
Very interesting. So this is right. So, and we've you and I have talked a bit about this before in the past, that first, 5 seconds. So I'm curious, and I don't know if you have a deep answer for this. You've given deep answers thus far up to this point, but so how does somebody know in those first 5 seconds, you had used the word hook. You said, right, like it's the hook in the first, 5 seconds. What's what are they actually saying? What's coming out of their mouth? What are they communicating? What's the copy? I'm curious though of is how do you decide if it is, let's say, the hook or what's actually being said, like how you're articulating the hook, right? Because you can take a hook just like you can take a big idea. And, folks ask all the time to take a left turn for 1 second. Folks ask all the time, what's the difference between the headline and the big idea? Like, aren't they the same? And the answer is no. The headline and the big idea behind a marketing campaign aren't the same thing. The headline are the words that we use to express the idea. And any idea can be expressed with a number of different words, which is why you can come up with a number of different headlines and variations to express the same underlying idea. So you can change the headline without changing the hook, or underlying idea. And so taking that now and applying it to that first 5 seconds, do you have any thoughts on like how do you know when you should change the copy that's being used versus testing, let's say, something like a different model, a different person going from a man to a woman? We know, for example, that, right, like, people stop a lot more to watch women and engage with images of women than they do men. Or how do you know if it is, or how do you decide, if you do it all, when it's, let's change the background, instead of me being static and seated at a desk like this, maybe it's me delivering the same exact copy, the same exact opening, but it's maybe me walking outside or me at the beach or me driving or something like that. And so do you have any kind of insights to when is it the copy versus, let's say, the format? Like maybe I should go from on camera to not being on camera, or the other way around, or maybe it shouldn't be me who's delivering this copy, maybe it should be somebody else in those first 5 seconds. Any thought on that?
Yeah, so we have a kind of a set structure that are a set I don't want to call them rules, but set things that we like that are nearly non-negotiables for us in our, say, YouTube ads. Like the things like captions burned in, like that's a non-negotiable, all those kind of things. So when we started, like for us, it's primarily the hooks and the angles that we're testing first and foremost. Once we find an angle or a hook that's hitting our KPIs, then we would start to test variations of that, like different backgrounds, like a different spokesperson, like a different style. But first and foremost, we're looking to get the angles or the hooks that are performing the way we want them to first, and then after that, we would look at the other elements. Does that make
God,
sense?
yes, totally does. And so you're nailing the kind of the hook first, and then you're playing with format, delivery, all of that. And so my follow-up question then is, because I want to make sure that I fully understand, and I want to make sure that everybody else fully understands. So in this context, when you say hook, are you talking about the overall angle, issue, problem, topic that's being addressed, or are you talking about what are the first words that come out of somebody's mouth? Like, are you like, let's say there was, you know, let's say we were, the ordinary hook, we were doing something for a diabetes supplement, and the approach that we were taking was more kind of fear based, like, don't succumb to the damage of diabetes. Like, are you, when you say finding the right hook, are you playing around with the words that you're using to articulate that fear-based approach? Or are you actually testing fear-based versus, more positive based? Like, is it the actual underlying idea that you're playing around with, or is it the copy to express the idea that you're playing around with?
It's more the copy to express the idea. So let's say,
Okay.
for example, we'll take this diabetes example, and it is a fear-based, like the hook or the overall theme of the copy on the sales page is fear-based. Then we're gonna switch up in the opening. That I prefer to call it the opening of the ad than hook, because it does get people mixed up between, is it a different hook than what's on the page, and etc. etc. So for the openings, we may present that idea in 4 to 5 different ways. We may present it like we have these kind of like, we have a framework that we use, that is, we have a heaven, a hell, a factual based statistics. To we talk about, let's say the fear based is that, you're talking about the fact that if you don't fix your diabetes issue, you're going to die young. You won't be able to go to your daughter's wedding, and all these different type of things to really induce that fear and that visceral feeling. So we may talk about the statistics of, if we're targeting, say, males over 40, that the statistics on did you know that males over 40 in the US, over 26% of them die before they reach 45. Like,
Yeah.
that's a fear-based statistic. So we would use a statistic element for one. We would use a is there a way we can present that fear-based in a, like, we call it a towards hell environment. So can we even like drill it even further, where we dial up the notches even further to bring them towards their to illustrate the pain that they could be in if they don't solve that problem. And then we would also switch it, while still keeping some sort of a fear element in there, to introduce the heaven, like what happens when they do solve it. So moving them from their fear into their heaven. Then, like I said, we would have a statistic. Then we leverage what we pretty much like that Rich has been talking about for a long time, is the taste element. So rather than like teasing, and this is something we're using a lot right now because it is working so well, rather than teasing like, in this video you're going to learn blah 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 blah, just get straight to it with the, here's 2 things you can do to fix your diabetes issue. 1, do this. 2, do that. And then like that's a hook in itself. And then another element we would use is like a social proof element. Is like, this is Tom. Tom's 45 years old, and he's been suffering with, he was 6 stone overweight, or whatever the case is, and now he's not. And now he was worrying about this, and now he's not. And then like that in itself is a hook. So we have kind of like frameworks that we use to introduce the overall theme or the idea of the offer to people.
Okay. Woof. That was like a rapid fire, a rapid fire masterclass in creative, like in terms of you just sharing so much, right? I have to absorb that and go back and watch this myself a second time. And so I don't want to overwhelm folks. There's so much that I want to talk about as it relates to creative. So I want to wrap. But before I do, is there any to kind of bring this down? If there was like, look, if there was, to bring this down now from, a lot of tactical stuff, a lot of moving parts, you shared a lot of stuff for folks to think about. If there was kind of one singular thing that you would share with folks about finding winning creative, or identifying winning creative, or how they should approach winning creative, is there one kind of thing, actionable thing, that you could share with people? We're going to continue to talk about creative on future calls. I'm going to continue to pick your brain, but is there like one thing that you would share to kind of bring it down to actionable for folks?
I mean, I think it's difficult to say one thing. I think there's like the creative, like, don't overlook it. Like, it's the first part of your campaign that people see. And if hopefully you're putting a lot of thought and effort into your actual campaign, and you should also be putting a lot of thought into your creative as well. Like we talk about when, like, with the offer, and I'm sure we'll talk about the offer at some stage as part of these videos, is that people oftentimes like, oh, they just throw together their offer in 10 minutes and they don't actually think through it. It's the same with your creative. If you don't actually think through your creative and think through it strategically, not just like tactical elements like we talked about, but strategically think through your creative, like, the chances are that the people that should be clicking on that creative, the people that you want to help, the people that you're putting money into these platforms to hopefully reach, chances are, if you're not thinking through your creative as much as you should be, you're not going to get the chance to help them. You're not going to get the chance to solve their problem. Like, hopefully you're putting offers out there into the marketplace because you do want to help people and you do want to solve their problem. And if you're just kind of skimping on the creative and saying, oh, I'll just throw together this and hope for the best, you're doing them a disservice and you're doing yourself a disservice. So like, really think through the creative process and from a strategic point of view, and then add in all the tactical nuance after the fact. And I think you'd be so much better off.
Yeah, well said. I think, we'll finish with this, going back to the conversation that I was having last night with Rich. One of the things, and we've talked about this multiple times before, and this isn't anything necessarily new, but I think it's worth repeating and reminding folks of, is that really, your funnel, your campaign is only going to be as effective as your ad creative. Right. Because if you can't get people to click, if you can't get the right people to click, if you can't stand out, if you can't get attention with your ad creative, then the volume of traffic that you're getting to your marketing campaign, to your funnel, is going to suffer. And so your funnel's success is determined by the quality of your creative. Not only the quality of your creative, we know that there are a lot of other elements that make the campaign work, but you could have a great campaign dialed, a great big marketing idea, unique mechanism, marketing argument, campaign thesis, sin offer, the whole nine. Everything could be dialed, the bump, the upsells, the downsells, the follow-up, all of that, the back end. But if you're weak on the ad creative side, well, the volume of traffic that you get is going to be suppressed. And not only that, but this is one thing that we'll talk about at some future point for sure, that was also part of this conversation last night, this larger conversation, was that the volume of traffic will not only suffer because of that, but the economics can be thrown off wildly on the campaign itself. So in other words, sometimes it could be the ad creative that is just subpar and is causing what it is that you are paying to get visitors to go through the roof, which is now throwing off the entire economics of the campaign. So you could actually take a great funnel, a great marketing campaign, right, cause a massive decrease in traffic, cause the price of that traffic or the cost of that traffic to go through the roof, all because the ad creative isn't up to par. It's not doing what it is that we need it to do, coupled with, of course, everything else in the media buying realm in your world. But I think that that's really something worthy of everybody to ponder, to really think about that. That ad creative ultimately determines how many people you expose to your funnel, to your offer, to your argument, as well as what it is that you're paying to get people to consume that message. And so, great
I
stuff.
think I think another thing to just to kind of sum it up as well is that, especially like two things. Well, first of all, especially now that the algorithms are getting so smart and like they're going to do the bulk of the heavy lifting in terms of getting the right people to see your creative. Like knowing that, it makes the creative that much more important. But then on top of that, let's say you're looking at the numbers in your funnel. You're looking at how the overall economics are playing out, and you're saying to yourself, oh, like the default that everyone usually goes to is, oh, my sales conversion rate is too low. And let's say your sales conversion rate is 1% and you know it needs to be 2%. That sounds like it's easy. It's like, oh, all I need to do is increase my sales conversion rate to 2%. That's a 100% increase on a
Right.
sales conversion rate in a funnel. It's a lot easier. I'm not saying it's super easy, but it's a lot easier to get a creative to go from 1% to 2% than it is a sales conversion rate on a funnel 1% to 2%. And the result is the exact same thing. You're half in if you get your creative, if you're at 1% right now and you're complacent with that 1% and you're not really strategically thinking through your creatives, I could guarantee that we could come in and we could look at your creatives and really align them with your offer, align them with everything that we've talked about, and increase your click through rates dramatically. And by doing that, we're reducing the cost of every single click that we get to your funnel, and thus getting more people to your funnel, giving you more opportunities to convert them, versus trying to, like we know how hard it is to iterate on a funnel and improve results, whereas oftentimes approaching creative from the right point of view and the right strategic angles and everything else can lead to dramatically better economics in your funnels as well, and can lead them to get to results a lot quicker as well.
Yeah, that's the money that, I mean, my gosh, maybe on the next call, we'll just talk about that. I know we just previously, a couple calls ago, talked about the economics, but right, this is a game of economics. We talk all the time about how direct response, what it is that we're doing online, is a game of psychology, communication, and arithmetic, right? And most people understand psychology. Psychology of what? Psychology of the marketplace, of the prospect, right? Communication. That's the copy. That's what we say based on what it is that we know about the psychology of the prospect. Most entrepreneurs, marketers get that. Where they kind of, what they don't fully and completely understand is the arithmetic, which is the economics of the marketing game. And I think that what you just said is so insanely important for folks to understand, that you can radically decrease your cost per acquisition, or your customer acquisition costs, without impacting sales conversion rate, by improving the creative, because that can lead to you paying significantly less per visitor, which then obviously, if you're depending on the campaign model that you're using, would lead to a much lower cost per lead, which if nothing else changes, could lead to or would lead to a much lower cost per acquisition, right? Therefore, making the economics work. And so it's important to understand that that improving the creative can fix a lot of economic issues. At the same time, not fixing the creative, not doing the creative right, can also take what could be a winning and effective campaign and make it, right, a campaign that's no longer viable. Right. And it's no longer viable, not because of anything done within the campaign itself, but merely because the creative isn't up to par and is therefore costing you more to get a visitor. And so that's like so insanely important. And you couple that with what it is that you said, which we also covered on a prior call, which is that, right, that the game is really shifting. The game of paid advertising or media buying online is really shifting to more of an emphasis on creative, as the algorithms do more of the heavy lifting in terms of the targeting, right? You talked and really shared, I believe it was the last call, about how you don't need to do all the kind of the ad sets, all of this stuff. Now that we're moving more towards letting the algorithm power it, which means that the creative now is the game. The advantage no longer comes from understanding the intricacies of how to set up all these different ad sets. It's letting the algorithm do its thing with good creative that brings you the volume of visitors that you want at the right cost, so that the economics play out in your favor on your campaign. And so, beautiful stuff. Love it. One more time, so like folks want to use, want to let your wizardry do their media buying, where do they go? I know we have it on the screen somewhere, but just what's the web
They
address
can
that they go
simply
to?
go to e5agency.com and they can get full information on how we can help them scale their campaigns right there. So letter E, number 5agency.com.
Love it, man. Awesome. Well, as always, brother, appreciate you hanging with me and letting me pick your brain. And I'm looking forward to next week as well, man.
Likewise.
All right. Thanks, dude.